then Ronaldo! Balotelli, Aguero! It's Bergkamp. That's magnificent. Here's Messi, away from 2, 3, 4. Wonderful, wonderful, wonderful.
The Football Drop Podcast.
Hello and welcome to an FDP special. We've got a special episode today, mate.
We have a very special episode. I think we've been arranging this for about 2 months now. Just keep missing messages, very busy, which is, totally understandable. He seems to do, I think he's probably the busiest guest we've ever had on, judging by his background and what he does. Yeah. Podcast, reporting, journalist, writing. He does guest hosting as well, and event hosting, video production. There's not much he doesn't do.
What he doesn't do probably isn't worth mentioning, so let's not do that.
Yeah, fair point. Well said. Well said.
I think we're going to enjoy this one, mate.
Yeah, I'm really excited about this. It's going to hopefully be some cracking stories, really good insight. Yeah, I just love our specials. I really do.
Me too. We got a few more planned, so hopefully that'll keep us busy for the rest of the summer along with the Euros. And then we'll be ready to go on to the new series. Right.
Season.
Let's
bring him on. Let's go. So, Richard Graves, thank you for coming on. How are you?
Yeah, very well, thanks. Thanks for having me.
Oh, my pleasure. It's an absolute pleasure. For anyone that is watching on YouTube, I'm sure you'll recognise him. He has been on Sky for nearly 2 decades. He left back in 2021 doing some freelance stuff. He's got his own media company now, as you can probably see from the little video. He's got his microphone boom there, which puts us to shame. So we've just got our Rode microphones here. But no, thank you for joining us. Tell us a little bit about yourself before we dive in, if you can.
Well, I'll start with the mic boom. Funnily enough, because as you mentioned, I set up on my own 3 years ago, having left Sky. And this is something that only came about 5 months ago when I went out to cover the Super Bowl over in the States. And one of my former radio colleagues sent me a link via email and said, have you thought about this? And he'd seen a company that will make up your own mic flags. And initially I dismissed it. But then when you're thinking about going out to cover an event as high profile as a Super Bowl and you're looking to work for different clients, well, nothing to lose. It could be good from a PR perspective. And funnily enough, in the first 24 hours, it paid off big time. I don't know how much you and Will know about the way Super Bowl week works, but on the Monday of Super Bowl week, so the very first night, you have what they call opening night. So every single player, every single coach from both the participating teams is available to interview for 60 minutes per team, and you can ask them literally whatever question you want. So I've done most of my interviews as we're getting towards the end of the night, and you'll always get some wacky out there reporter that's got a gimmick just to try and catch a player's eye and get an exclusive word or two with him. And I can't remember exactly what it was, but there was one of these reporters that I saw, and I've got my phone that's recording my stuff for my own YouTube channel on the end of a big long selfie stick, and I've got this mic there with mic flag, and I'm just there recording it and going around and thinking, oh, that's good. You can put some color to the footage you're putting out on YouTube. Anyway, 24 hours later, I get a text from a friend in America, which literally read, "Oh my God, I've just seen you on TV," which in itself was a little bit strange because they know what I do. Then I got sent the footage from family members back in the UK who are associated with this friend, and it was the Late Show with Jay Leno. They'd had their own crew out there, and it was them that had this wacky idea just to get reactions. And all of a sudden, you see this rather lost-looking figure. That was me, just wander into shot, mic flag and all. Only about 3 seconds. but it was enough to have people on both sides of the Atlantic notice it. And I was like, well, that's why you invest in something like that. So yeah, I haven't answered your initial question at all, which is a great political way of handling things in this current climate as we head to a general election. But I thought I'd share that Mike Flag story with you. What was the question again?
I was going to say, tell us a little bit about yourself, but I mean that's a great intro, really, to be honest. Yeah, we'll just kind of dive straight in, I think. So, I mean, everyone probably will have heard of your name or know and seen your face at some stage across Sky or pretty much any sports broadcast at some stage. But what kind of started your sort of journey in your career into journalism, and I suppose specifically sports journalism as well?
Honestly, I guess I was one of the lucky few people who, from literally just this high, age of 7 years old, I knew I wanted to be a sports commentator. As long as I can remember, I was a sports mad kid, played cricket, football, rugby, you name it. If it was competitive, I was going to be involved. And as you get older, you realise that whilst you might be good enough to play for your school team or local club, you're not actually good enough to make it to the very top. But I loved commentating as well. And I can remember the closing stages of the Grand National in 85, 86, around that time, as they horses pull away from the final fence. Peter O'Sullivan, one of the greatest racing commentators I've ever heard. He's there doing the commentary. And I learnt it by heart. The final 250 yards, I can remember literally jumping up and down on my mum and dad's sofa, and I would recite it word for word. So, in that sense, I was quite fanatical, passionate about it, and it's what I wanted to do. And I don't know if it's still the case for kids now, but at the time you'd get to 14, 15 years old, just before GCSEs, as it was for me, and teachers would come up with this great idea of you'd fill in a questionnaire, put it into a computer, and this would tell you, it'd be a revelation, what career you were destined for and best suited to. And I filled out mine, and shock, be a sports commentator. So that was all I ever wanted to do. And I got to a stage where I finished my A levels, and at the time, so we're going back 30 years now, 94. There was only one, as far as I was aware of, one university in the country that did a proper broadcasting course. There's lots of media studies courses, but that didn't really work around the career that I envisaged. So that one university was up at Leeds. I think I got sent an offer of requiring 2 A's and a B at A level. I won't keep it quiet. I got a C and 3 D's. Didn't quite make the mark there. So that never happened. And from then on, it was a case of, okay, what's the other alternative route here? And I had a friend whose associate ran hospital radio in Huddersfield. At the time, they were looking for their own permanent license as well for a local radio station. So they were doing what they call RSLs, month-long stints, which are basically auditions to get a permanent license. So he invited me to join him doing hospital radio, commentating on Huddersfield Town matches. At the time, they were in what is now League One. I do some stints on the RSL local temporary station as well. Had the prime slot of 1 till 4 in the morning on a Friday morning. The desk was overloaded with calls and inquiries at that time, as you can imagine. But that was the way it started. So I went from hospital and radio and work experience to doing Leeds United games on Radio Air, because at the time that commercial station in Leeds had the broadcasting rights. And over the next 6 or 7 years, worked my way up to doing full commentary, made a point of networking. I'd speak to anyone I saw on the gantry that was a recognisable face, just introduce yourself. And I defy anybody to find a professional broadcaster that won't give you 5 minutes just to show a bit of interest and perhaps offer some guidance. And the rest is history, as they say. I did a spell being self-employed, started doing some work for Sky. That led to a permanent position with them. And here we are, like I say, 30 years on now, running my own media company.
Fantastic. Absolutely brilliant.
You must have covered some topics as well over the course of those years. Have you got like something that sticks out in your memory?
There are obviously great sporting events. You think of the 2019 World Cup. That was part of Sky Sports coverage on Sky Sports News in covering that. I've been really fortunate in being able to cover a sport I'm passionate about, and was a fan before I became a professional broadcaster covering it in the NFL. I've been on location now to 8 Super Bowls.
Fantastic.
I've even done a WrestleMania over in Phoenix, Arizona, and I can remember as a kid growing up when Sky was relatively new. I think only sort of 3-4 years old. My dad had bought Sky for the bargain price. I think something like $14.99 a month, everything in. Imagine that now. And one of the first events that just happened to come on TV was this American wrestling event. It turned out to be WrestleMania, and you saw the hype to it. One year, that one of the hypes was, I've made it to WrestleMania. Each of these wrestlers would come on, and that would be the promo for it. And I'll never forget being in Phoenix, and they've sold out the stadium there. So you've got, I don't know, 60, 70,000 people. And there's some wrestling fans that take this really seriously. They have all the replica belts. They come fully dressed. They're in character. It's something else. It's something that has to be seen to be believed type of thing. But I do remember going there to cover it, and you're in the media box, which is a million miles away from this tiny, minuscule ring in the middle of this huge stadium. But just drawing breath and thinking, I've made it to WrestleMania, which at the time I remember laughing at, thinking, this sounds nuts, Richard. But it was just one of those things that you see as a kid on TV growing up, that's thousands of miles away. It's across the pond. Bear in mind, I'd never been to America until I was 30 years old. So when you're, I don't know how old I was at the time, 13, 14 years old, and you see this, it's like, it's like watching the Super Bowl. You're never going to make it. And then all of a sudden you find yourself inserted into these various events. Some people will dismiss them. Some people will envy you for them. But what you can't escape is you've got, when you're going to an event where you've got 70, 80, 90,000 paying fans. This is something that means something to people. Ironically enough, one of the Super Bowls that I covered, Super Bowl 49, was also in Arizona. And before the game, we'd go around and just get a flash taste of fans' expectations, opinions. And I got talking to this one family that had made it over from Australia for the Super Bowl. Seahawks against the Patriots. And it's a family of 4, mother, father, 2 kids. And you always say, show us your tickets. So they're proud of showing you tickets. If you don't mind me asking, how much do they cost? And the dad turned around and said, well, I'll tell you how much the whole trip's cost. And we've saved up. It's a once in a lifetime event for this family. So accommodation, travel, tickets, expenses, just to be at the game and see it, $75,000 for the 4 of them.
What?
And yeah, well, exactly. An astonishing amount of money. And you do hear this type of story told over and over again from people that all they've ever wanted to do is just be there one time so they can experience it. And so that gives you an idea of how much it means to them. But equally, if you always take a moment, just look around and draw breath, take it all in, you realize in that second as well how fortunate that I am to be there, because I love this game as much as any of these fans do. I'm not just there because it's a passion. Somebody's paying me to be there, and I've got tickets for the game as well. So how lucky am I to be in that situation? And that, it doesn't matter whether it's the Super Bowl, whether it's a Premier League game, whether it's a World Cup cricket or rugby game. Each and every one of these events, Grand Final, Rugby League, Challenge Cup Final, these are events that people will work hard all week or month or year long for, to save up because it's their one treat to themselves, or getting a chance to see their team participate and they never thought it would happen. And you're part of this experience as well all the time. So I've always said throughout my career that yes, it's work, but you should never actually lose track of its entertainment, its sport, it's fun. Always remember to enjoy it and take in the moment as well. And that's the privileged position I find myself in.
Oh, I can't even begin to imagine trying to justify to my other half spending £75,000 on a ticket to the Arsenal at the Champions League final.
But you're okay, Ben, because it's not going to happen anytime soon, is it? he said tongue in cheek.
Unfortunately, that's all we've got time for, guys. But yeah, Richard, thanks for your time. So I just want to kind of touch on the fan side of that quickly, because I mean we're not fortunate enough to have gone to America to also experience kind of that fanfare side of things. And I know Super Bowl was absolutely famous for the sort of experience. You got everyone, 4, 5, 6 hours before games, back of their trucks. They've got barbecues, they've got parties and things. What's it like to be part of that? Do you really genuinely get sucked into that?
Well, I'll tell you this much: that the first Super Bowl I did was, I think, 2014 Super Bowl 48 in New York. The only time New York has hosted the Super Bowl, and it was a bit of a whirlwind experience. Even though I was there for 8 days before the event and stayed 2 days afterwards, because there's so much going on and your head's spinning. You're trying to keep up with it because it's unlike anything we'll ever have or experience in this country. No disrespect to the way NFL games are staged here. They've tried to do tailgating and a party experience. It's nothing like what you get in America. For example, I've covered Thanksgiving games in Dallas. That game doesn't kick off till 3:30 p.m. local in Dallas. I know people have been queuing in their pickup trucks outside tailgating parks because they want to be in there first from 4 a.m. in the morning. That you can go to opening day, kickoff night. Philadelphia was a classic example. And that game didn't kick off till, I think, about 8:20 p.m. in the evening. Tailgating opened at 9 a.m. I got to speak to the drivers of the first pickup truck in. They were smashed by 4 or 5 in the afternoon. And I'm reliably informed they never even made it to the game. So it is one big party. And you've got people with on Thanksgiving Day, turkey's a big thing in America, and I remember seeing this one set of fans that were there. They had this, what I can only describe as a big cylindrical element, and they just got the turkey and dunked it. They fried the whole thing. You have people that bring their own barbecues. There's 55-inch TVs set up on the back of pickups for fans that go there just for the tailgating. No intention to get paid for a ticket to go in the stadium. They're going to watch it on the back of their pickup in this tailgating park. You've got games of cornhole. You've got football games going on. And generally speaking, it's a really relaxed, friendly atmosphere, lots of banter. People, the amount of times I've been offered a beer and I've had to turn around and say, honestly, I'm working. I would love to join you. It's 30 degrees right now, and I'm the only one here in a shirt and tie, looking ridiculous. I'm going to have to turn you down. So yeah, it's an unbelievable atmosphere. And once I'd got over that first trip or two, and you know what to expect, suddenly you can get your head around it. You can take it all in a lot easier, and then you can make the most of it, because there's that much there that you can't fail to convey the excitement, the atmosphere, the anticipation to fans of sport back here in the UK. But yeah, as for, is there anything like it over here? No, not at all. On game day, it is game day. Quite often here, we've got Premier League games. You might meet your mate in the local pub for a pint, go to the game, then you're off back home. Over there, it starts when you get up, it finishes when you get home, last thing at night. Game day is game day, and they really do organise everything around it.
Yes, I mean, you've got things kind of like Box Park that, they're growing, it seems to be by the week at the moment, to kind of engage that sort of fan interaction. Do you think that will, increase the sort of enjoyments of games in the future? Not just football, but, any sport really. Do you think we'll be able to learn some stuff and kind of implement that across here in the UK?
It'll never be the same as over in the States, but I think unquestionably it will filter through. I mean, you've only got to look at what Tottenham have done since they built their new stadium. Again, I know this might be a sore subject with the Arsenal shirts in the background there, guys. But first of all, they've got the tie-up with the NFL. Secondly, they built the stadium specifically with accommodating the NFL in mind. And thirdly, you look at the facilities and the way they've tried to organise stuff. I don't think I'm saying anything that nobody already doesn't know, but the area around Tottenham isn't the first area you'd think of around the stadium to go and hang around, drink, and have a great night out immediately after the game. But the stadium itself now has facilities where they actively encourage people to come earlier in the day before the game and stay on later. So it becomes more of an entertainment scene as well. And I think as time goes on and progresses and more facilities are built and the Premier League especially evolves with the greater American influence from ownership and sponsorship and so on, I think it's inescapable that that's the way it'll go. Like I say, I'm not sure you can transfer the entire game day experience from the States over here, but it's going to be more prevalent as time goes on, I think.
And it's about the building up the show, isn't it? That's what they're really good at.
Yeah.
Building up the show and making it like the halftime kind of element of things like that they have. I think that's what's needed for like the last day of the season, the FA Cup final or something.
And there's the irony, of course, because as a kid growing up, the FA Cup final was always the entire day. Yeah. You'd get up. For my sins, I'm an Everton fan growing up as a boy, and I can remember back in the 80s and the 95 Cup final, Everton were in the Cup final, and you'd have that TV on at 9 a.m. By 10 a.m., there'd be build-up. Sky Sports News, when it came into being in the late 90s, would have a reporter outside both hotels first thing in the morning, literally down to what the star player of the day had in his breakfast bowl cereal. You'd know it. Now, in the last 10 years, I think that's been eroded somewhat. We've seen the authorities fiddle around with the kickoff times of the FA Cup final. It was no longer a 3 o'clock cup final. And sometimes there are other events going on at the same time, which, act as a distraction. What I did like this year was there seemed to be a concerted effort to get back to we're going to make the cup final a standalone event again. And I think that's something that's badly needed for all the criticism that people, in some respects, might correctly have about plans for the FA Cup going forward. I think the idea of once again highlighting the importance of it as a standalone event for its reputation, for the history of the FA Cup, I think all that is important. And again, I think the reason we're seeing this effort being made is because it's a tacit acknowledgement that over time it's been eroded. And that can go all the way back to I can't remember which year it was, but there was a year when I think teams were involved in the World Club Challenge or something like that, and they withdrew from the FA Cup. And that was like, well, what's going on here? This is meant to be the greatest football domestic cup competition in the world, and you've got teams getting buys through the third round or whatever it was. So yeah, I'm actually in favour of making an effort to, put the FA Cup on a pedestal again, because it's got such history, so many magic moments and memories down the years. I will bemoan the loss of replays, because that's part of what made the FA Cup for me. Yeah. But if you can just bring back some originality, some moment that makes it that standalone event again, I think that's a good thing.
Yeah, I mean, just on the replay side of things, I completely agree. Maidstone United, I mean, they're about an hour or so away from where Will and I sort of, our area where we live, and kind of watching what they've done this season, it as you said, it's the magic of the cup. If they lose replays and things like that, teams like that don't get to have those big days out. Going to, places like Old Trafford, Anfield, Emirates, Stamford Bridge, Tottenham to a certain degree, seeing that stadium when you're a non-league club will be incredible. To play on the pitch would be amazing. So if you can somehow hash out a draw at your place, get a 0-0 or a 1-1 and get to go return, who cares when you get pumped 5-0? It's still a great day out, and it's great for the club in terms of that sort of revenue and finance side as well.
I completely agree. I keep using this phrase, the magic of the FA Cup, because down the years you have seen moments, but it's not just the opportunity for fans to experience grounds that otherwise they would never. If you're a Maidstone fan, you wouldn't ever expect to be playing at Tottenham or Arsenal or Manchester United, realistically. But it's the financial revenue that comes with being able to pull off an upset draw or get a replay back at your own ground, and TV revenue that comes in. What many Premier League clubs would be quite dismissive of, because it might barely cover one player's wages, that the revenue for that round. For a club in the non-league, it could set them up for several years hence, no financial worries. And this all plays into it. It's all part of the melting pot. And the reason I love replays is because, some of the greatest FA Cup ties, and for young fans now, they'll say, what on earth are you talking about? But some of the greatest FA Cup ties had 2, 3, 4 replays before the game was decided. Forget the idea of penalties. For me, one of the greatest cup ties of all time was in '91, Merseyside derby. And the first game was dire. It was awful at Anfield. It finished 0-0. Replay back at Goodison. Was it 3 days later? Oh, 9 days, one or the other. It was a Wednesday night. And that went to extra time. It finished 4-4. Liverpool were the big dogs at the time. It was the game, I think, ultimately saw Kenny Dalglish resign as manager in his first tenure as Liverpool manager. And then you go back to another replay, and Everton somehow managed to win that at the time. But you can go through any club in the Football League, and they'll all have an FA Cup story, a giant killing story. Oldham back in the day, knocking off teams at Boundary Park and the plastic pitch. Luton, when they had the artificial surface at Kenilworth Road and so forth. I really do think it's a loss to what the competition is all about, that you're not going to have those replays now. But in what is an increasingly congested calendar with, no longer just the Champions League and the 4 or 5 teams that go in to represent that from the country, or the Europa League and the several teams that go into that, but you now have the Europa Conference League as well. Yeah. So something has to give, I guess, and I suppose this is probably one of the better compromises that they could come up with.
Yeah, disappointing, but yeah, I think I agree with you on that one. Just going back to kind of your career side of things, I'm assuming you've met a lot of high-profile people over the years. Is there anyone that's made you feel a little bit starstruck?
A little bit starstruck. I suppose sitting down with Sir Alex Ferguson was more in trepidation initially, because I'd been told what he could be like and how his manner was occasionally with journalists. But I can remember sitting down with him to have a chat specifically about one of his players at the time, and he came in and he was fantastic. He waxed lyrical and gave one of the better interviews that I think I've done in football. In terms of being starstruck, I think the first time I ever walked field side or pitch side at a ground was I was doing some work for Radio Leeds United, work experience, back in the early 90s. And it was a Monday night game. Leeds fans, well, football fans generally might remember it because it was the game when Tony Yeboah scores that amazing volley against Liverpool in front of the Rebbe stand. But prior to the game, I come out of one of the corner tunnels and I'm walking pitch side in front of the main stand where the dugouts are at Elland Road, and across the field is the Big East stand, which was relatively new at the time, but it towered above you as it was. And the lights are on. It's 7:30 p.m. Most of the crowd are inside the stadium. I remember looking around and going, "Whoa!" I've been in stadiums before, but you're in the stands as a fan. You're never actually pitch level, looking up with 40,000 fans all, as it felt, bearing down on you, type of thing. And then I can remember being in the tunnels, the players coming out for that game, and Ian Rush had just joined Leeds, and there's Lee Sharp there, and you see Yeboah go past, and it was like, what's going on here? But yeah, that was being starstruck a little bit of time, because suddenly you're actually in the mix of it all, in the thick of it all, and it was a little bit of take a step back. What's going on? But again, that's the beauty of my job now, because the amount of times you find yourself in those scenarios, those situations, and if you don't enjoy the atmosphere, the anticipation, the excitement, the build-up, then what the heck are you doing here, type of thing. This is what sport's all about. The main event, like I say, the anticipation of what's about to come, and knowing that if you're lucky enough, this might be the day that you see something that you don't usually see, that sticks in the mind for for years and years to come. So yeah, the sport generally, it's a job for me, but it's also passion, and no matter what the environment is, if it's competitive, you're going to love it.
Is there anyone that you can think of that maybe dead or alive that you think I could get a great interview with them? I'd love to speak to them and just ask them a question or a series of questions.
The one person I did have the opportunity to speak to him while he was still alive, but I was very young and raw as a reporter at the time, and certainly never made the most of it. Given the opportunities now, I'd love to sit down with Shane Warne and talk cricket. The one time I did speak to him, I was a local radio reporter in Leeds at the time, and I think it was the summer before an Ashes tour to Australia, and him and Merv Hughes were in Leeds doing a lunch event at the Queen's Hotel. Now, today you wouldn't get within 200 yards of them without having a press pass. Back in those days, you could just rock up. There was not really a press officer around or whatever. You could just try your luck. So I've gone to the Queen's Hotel, thinking Shane Warne and Merv Hughes are there, get an opportunity to chat to them. Merv Hughes got to Shane Warne, and he was like, I've got a book signing session across town, Waterstones. Do you know where it is? I was like, yeah, it's about a 15-minute walk across town. He said, right, okay, if you're willing to walk with me, I'll do the interview. We'll walk and talk.
Wow.
And so from the
Wow.
Queen's Hotel, we walked across Leeds city centre, pedestrian crossings, traffic lights, roads. and that's how I got this interview with Shane Warne, talking about cricket, about his career to date at that point, because I guess he was about 6-7 years into his international career, and what he thought and expected of the Ashes to come later that winter down under in Australia. Like I said at the time, you're a little bit raw, local radio reporter, felt relatively insignificant, but two things stick out. One, how accommodating he was, and you speak to anybody about Shane Warne, one of the things they always say is he always had time for somebody, no matter who it was. And that's my one experience, because he didn't know me from Adam. And yet I just turned up any chance. It wasn't a no. It wasn't I haven't got any time. It was, if you're willing to walk across town with me, I'll do the interview with you. And he was absolutely fantastic. Whereas now, 20 years on, or whatever it is, 25 years on, if you had the opportunity to, having played a lot of cricket myself, not to any great level again, there's so much more that I could get into him about, and just want, like we're doing now, just chew the fat about ideas, thoughts, opinions, just because he had that great mind, and he had an appreciation of what made sport work for the fans as well. And unfortunately, very sadly, he's one of those personalities that was taken away from us all too soon.
I'm just trying to picture just seeing Shane Warne just strolling down the street in Leeds, just talking microphone, and just yeah, it's just surreal.
Yeah.
I mean, nowadays you see like the footballers, I suppose we're not, press or anything, but you see it on TV, when Sky Sports or whoever's covering it, the footballers have got their big earphones on, similar to me, strolling through, don't even talk to anyone. You think are they like that really? When they do these press talks with you guys, is it you have 5 minutes and that's it?
It's a world away from what it was when I started this career 30 years ago. 30 years ago, again, like I say, working for local radio in Leeds, you had a relationship with the players and staff at Leeds United, whereby, as it stands right now, the only time you do interviews with players is if it's pre-arranged or it's the day of the press conference and you get invited to it. Back in the 90s, I could drive up to Leeds United's training ground. You'd know the guy on the security gates. There weren't gates there then, by the way. He just had his hut type of thing. And you'd wait for the guys to come off the training pitch, and you'd have a chat. You'd have numbers of the players as well, and there'd be a sort of a relationship outside of just football. But I won't name the player in question. I'll never forget arranging an interview with a Leeds United player back in the day when George Graham was manager. And this better highlights the difference between then and now than any other story I can think of. And it wasn't a case of me just rocking up and saying, "Can we do it?" We prearranged this interview between myself and the player. Anyway, I get there and player's gone. What do you mean he's gone? No, he said he didn't have time. He's gone. So George Graham comes down and is like, "What are you doing here?" And explains to him, "I was meant to be having a chat with so and so player, but he's gone." "Hang on one moment," he says, gets his phone out, dials this number. "Well, did you arrange this?" Yeah, I did. "Well, where have you gone?" Don't hear the reply, but the response from George Graham was something to the lines of, "Well, you either get back here now and do this interview, or you will be fined for it." And sure enough, this player
Oh,
comes back and we do
wow.
the interview. Now, I can't imagine anybody in the Premier League in the modern era acting in such a fashion. But that and like I said at the time, press officers were just coming into the game, but weren't really a thing as such. So that's just an idea of the relationship that local media and the professionals at the time had. Whereas now, yeah, that's not happening. Trust me.
No, so I mean, it's kind of been widely publicised, that whole sort of press and club dynamic and the relationships there. And there are some journalists that unfortunately over the years have taken things a little bit too far, and like the
I will
paparazzi
say
pictures
this:
and
it
things
is
like
it is
that at
improving
times.
and has
Mm,
improved over the last couple of years. And again, I talk about the American influence on our sport here. That's inevitable in the way the advent of media accessibility with Amazon documentaries, Netflix documentaries, the way you've seen clubs like Manchester City, for example, throw open their doors, and obviously American ownership as well. The fact that teams go on pre-season, as we've seen latterly, post-season
mm.
tours abroad to try and expand their appeal and appeal to their foreign fan bases as well. So in the last few years, that they got to a time not that long ago when the chasm, I think, between media and football clubs was the size of a Grand Canyon. It felt like the default answer to most requests was no, and then we'll think about how can we move on from that. Whereas now there's a far greater appreciation of the need to have that relationship, so that in some respects it gives you the opportunity, if you're a football club, to control any narratives as well if you have a positive relationship. And also that they're far more aware that it's important to convey the work they do in the community, and how they try and grow that connection with their own fan bases.
Mm.
So I think relationships are getting a lot better. I just came off doing a day with a football club where they had a principal partners day to finish the season, and that basically entailed sponsors, partners being invited to the club. They got presented with their own kit, and they were managed by a former manager. They got to play a 60-minute game on the football pitch.
Oh,
And it's
brilliant.
little things like that, you see, that you think, so what? Well, I'm telling you that 5 or 6 years ago, I don't think that happens. Not least because the
Wow.
groundsman doesn't want anybody on his pitch, or we've got to dig up the pitch so it's ready for next season. Whereas now I think there's a greater appreciation, understanding that, no, we do need that connection, because if we're not playing for our local community, our own fans, then who are we playing for, really? So, yeah, I think you see more instances of that, certainly with the media. I know of certain clubs that will have open WhatsApp groups, for example. So there's that constant open line of communication, both for good and bad. And it's all part of bringing those parties closer together and working hand in hand, if you like. And that slowly but surely, that almost, I want to say, fear that at one point I think some football clubs had of the media is being eroded and broken down. But I will also say, I think the media's got a role to play in that as well. I think in this era of instant news, 24/7 access, there comes points when the media's got a responsibility. It's not just about getting clicks on a story or headlines or so on. There does need to be a greater awareness. So it works on both sides.
And sticking with the Premier League, because I know you do some work with Sheffield United, and that they obviously were relegated at the end of the season, and so were the other two teams that came up from the Championship. What's your sort of feelings on that, given that your club Everton and Forest were deducted points, and the gulf between? Do you think that's something to worry about, or is that just something that happened for this one season?
It's not something that's just happened this one season. I think it's something to have some concern about, because I can't remember off the top of my head exactly what the highest points total was of the three that went down. Was it 26, 27 points for Luton, was it? In that
I think something
last
like
relegation place. Well, there was a time when, we still talk about it during the course of the season. Can you get to 40 points to ensure you're safe? Then it sort of went down. Will 36, 37 points be enough to ensure you're safe? Well, this season, you didn't need to get to 30 points to be safe. And that, like you say, was with two clubs having points deducted through the course of the season. So, and this is only a personal opinion. I do think it's something worth keeping an eye on. I think it's inescapable, the fact that the chasm between the Football League and the Premier League in terms of just pure finances is getting bigger. And I've spoken a lot about Leeds because obviously early in my career they were integral to what I've achieved. But the fact they didn't get promoted this year, I think, is a concern for them. One of the first things that their board said afterwards was make it very clear that they were going to conform to PSR rules. So, yes, very disappointed. Leeds United aren't getting promoted. Very disappointed. Leeds United have lost the Championship playoff final. But don't fear, we're conforming with PSR rules. I think that in itself is a strong indicator of what priorities are now when it comes to football. For a long time, we've spoken about it. The football isn't just a sport, it's a business. Well, with points being deducted for both Everton and Nottingham Forest, with teams from the Championship coming under increasing scrutiny, and like I say, conforming to PSR rules. You look at Leicester City, and ultimately it went through a legal route that they didn't get deducted points this season. But I would be very surprised if we don't see something happen over the next few months regarding their position. I don't know it well enough to pass comment on it, but quite clearly that their own financial position is under scrutiny as well. So, Sheffield United start next season on minus points in the Championship because of the way their finances have been operated over the last several years or so. To then make it in the Premier League and stay in the Premier League and actually improve in the Premier League, I think is a massive challenge for any football club now. And with that being said, I think you've got to, doff your cap to both Brentford and Bournemouth with what they've been able to achieve over the last few years. Being able to occupy a place in mid-table and really not ever be worried about relegation from the Premier League in this past season, I think is a tremendous achievement for both. How long they're able to keep that going for, well, that's open to debate. Burnley, I think, were in the Premier League for 7 years before they got relegated. They bounced straight back up. And as we've just touched upon, they weren't even able to make it to 30 points this season, and they get relegated again. So the challenge is real for those teams that, are season campaigners in English football's top flight. The premium on maintaining that is high.
Yeah, I think it's almost incentivized, isn't it, to almost overspend? I was at a conference a little while ago, and I think it was like 60 or 70% of clubs in the sort of official football, professional football league. I think 70% of them will happily overspend if they think it's almost going to guarantee promotions and work their way up the leagues. They'll happily overspend well above their means because it benefits them, doesn't it?
Let's be honest. There's a reason Everton are building a new stadium with 50,000 seats, over there on Merseyside. It's because they want to increase their revenue, so they have the opportunity to at least have a chance of being competitive when it comes to the transfer market and maintaining their position in the Premier League. For anybody that saw the the reasons and arguments that Forest put forward when they were deducted points this past season. One of the lines in a statement that came after the initial decision or mitigating circumstances, I think they offered it as, were spending money to acquire players so they could be competitive in the Premier League. Well, look, I'm no lawyer when it comes to this, but if you're going to have financial regulation, I don't really see how one of the mitigating circumstances for you overspending as a club is that you're spending more so you can be competitive. Fact remains, you've breached the financial regulations of that competition. And I think that's one of the issues that the Premier League are having to get to grips with now, and the EFL to some extent as well, that, you know, in order to maintain the integrity of their competition and perhaps more importantly, you know, the financial stability of individual football clubs, you need an infrastructure put round or framework put round that can ensure that financially they're all going to be viable. If you, in my opinion, if you start offering as a mitigating factor that you're spending more to be competitive, regardless of the ramifications of that isn't, you know, that any business model is going to tell you that is doomed to fail ultimately.
Yeah,
you know,
exactly.
you've got to balance the books at some point, because it will catch up with your business if you don't. Like I say, I'm not a lawyer, I'm not a legal person, but that, you know, on the face of it, seems to me to be quite pragmatic, that you've got to ensure the survival of all the clubs as they are right now. They need to be, you know, financially viable.
Oh, absolutely. And just stick on the Everton side then. So obviously we know over the last few years Everton have, you know, stayed up, but it's been a bit of a struggle, and it's kind of sometimes down to the last few games. You know, without digging you out too much, of course. But yeah, what's kind of next for Everton then? Do you think? You know, points deductions, have they, by the sounds of it, that's kind of done now? Hopefully, it won't be any more, and you know, kind of draw a line in the sand and kind of build upon that. Obviously, with the new stadium and bits and pieces. But what's next for them?
Well, next for them is to find a new owner. You know, Mashiri's made it very clear
it's not happening, isn't it?
Yeah, well, exactly. So that's all up in the air at the moment. You know, until that's resolved, I think there's going to be, you know, Everton are going to be in some degree of limbo. So, yeah, first and foremost, they have to resolve the ownership issue, because as things stand, I think Everton are in for another season of struggling next year. They don't have the cash to spend, the war chest for Sean Dyche to go into the transfer market and spend 50, 60, 70 million on a player, maybe not even a group of players, if we're being honest. You know, you look at the business they did last year, and you had Ashley Young come in on a free, and then there was a couple of signings made right at the end of the transfer window with a couple of loan players added. It could be very much a case of same again this time around. I know that they've got contract offers out to the likes of Seamus Coleman to try and get another year out of him, but Everton aren't going to be making any big splashes in the transfer market this summer. And, you know, it's quite conceivable that once again you might see one of their higher profile stars leave the club. It's all speculation, admittedly, but the likes of Onana, Branthwaite, them two names I've seen regularly banded around with interest from other clubs. It remains to be seen whether Everton have the wherewithal to be able to hold on to them. Certainly most Evertonians will be hoping so. But yeah, I think if Everton can get through this season, move into the new stadium, you know, next year, then maybe with the ownership issue resolved, maybe they can start looking forward. But for the time being, with so much going on off the pitch, I think Everton once again are just looking at, you know, securing Premier League status for another year, becoming financially sound, not having points deductions, having a new owner in place, and then maybe moving forward.
Excellent. And predictions for where you're going to finish next season?
Tiger Woods always says that he only enters a competition if he believes he can win it, doesn't he? So that's where we're going with Everton, isn't it? We all start the season on the same points. You know, Pep Guardiola suggested that he might not be hanging around Man City too much longer. Well, I believe Jurgen Klopp got, it's the accusation at him was that by announcing he was leaving early, that maybe distracted a few of the players. So let's hope that the Man City players are distracted a little bit, and that 2016 Leicester City win the Premier League. Who would have thought that? What was it, 500-1 at the start of the season?
Yeah.
So why not us? Why not Everton?
I'm going to put £1 on it now.
Yeah, that's
Good luck. I won't be putting £1 of my money on it.
Yeah, I think that's worth it.
It's not worth £1, no.
Dare to dream.
With the news that the VAR is staying, what was your thoughts on that? What changes would you like to see as well in the next season?
I'm pleased VAR staying. Batten down the hatches now for the feedback you get on that. Look, I don't think the issue is VAR per se. I think it's the implementation of VAR. If, as you hear, is being suggested now, there's going to be an open line of communication that fans have access to, I think that's a big plus and helps. Fans both at home watching on TV and in the stadium can then understand what the interaction is and what's being debated. I think the idea of semi-automated offside decisions helps. Again, personal opinion, but I would argue that the reason we in football have struggled so much with the implementation of VAR is because the authorities have tried to make it too exact. So goal line technology, it's black and white. It's either over the line or it isn't. We can all agree to that. Great stuff. When you start saying, right, we're going to make it black and white on offside decisions, I think you suddenly give yourself a headache because even with the quality of Ultra HD, you cannot tell me exactly when the ball leaves the boot of the player playing the pass through. And if you can't give us a starting point, how can you give us an end point of, if you're going to say a player's offside by effectively a toenail, as we've seen happen in some games, then you need to be pretty sure of where it's starting. I personally would, back in the day, I don't know if you guys remember this, but when you didn't have video technology, that one of the advisories given towards implementing offside was the benefit of the doubt goes with the attacking side. I think if you said with VAR, we're giving offside if it's clearly offside, nobody has an issue with that. The moment you start saying, right, we're going to slow it down, go frame by frame, not really sure, you draw the lines and still, well, it's flashed up red, but you can't really see it with the naked eye. I think that's too precise. I go back to what I said right at the start of our conversation. Sport is supposed to be enjoyed. So you don't lose, if your concern is that you lose the ability to be able to debate decisions the following morning on TV, in the papers, having a coffee, wherever it might be, I don't think you lose any of that by saying, unless it's really clear and obvious and you can see daylight there, then you're going to say just play on. You look at some decisions, for instance, the FA Cup semi-final, the goal that never was for Coventry. I would argue that was close enough to say, let it go. In the amount of time they took to give that offside decision, there was a goal Sheffield United scored several years ago at Tottenham when the offside was given against a player wide out on the right. And it literally was, well, I can't see that, but you're telling me with those lines is offside. I really don't think that is what the idea behind VAR was when it was originally thought up and introduced. And I think what you see in other sports, so in cricket, the on-field decision, umpire's call, I think that lends weight to the credibility of the official on the field at the time. I think in rugby, you hear the communication between the video ref and the ref on the pitch. Tennis, you see it on Hawkeye, it's fairly black and white type of thing, and the umpire's decision is final in the chair as well. So I think the problems football's experienced with VAR are largely of its own making. I do think there's a way out of it by creating that grey area. And I would say, look, if that means you get debates the following morning, bring it on. The more people I've got talking about my sport, my products, my competition, the better. But we don't need it negatively. The reason people are so against VAR, and you hear crowds chanting against it in stadia at times, is because you can't see the rationale behind it. You're not at the moment hearing the debate that's going on, and I don't for the life of me understand why it's taken so long for football to embrace this idea that will make the communication lines open for everybody to hear. Because again, I don't see that being anything but good for the game. You can debate it till the cows come home. You can turn around and say, I don't agree with it, but at least you can understand it. It's almost, I do think you've got to be more transparent, more accessible. It's the people's game, for crying out loud. So make it the people's game. I'm a fan of VAR. I think it helps. I think the implementation needs to be improved. And I will say this for Howard Webb, who's in charge of football officials. I've spoken to him in this past season, and he is very clearly driven to that goal. It's a shared belief. It's something he's striving for, and I think whilst he's in charge of it, ultimately it'll head in the right direction. I know there'll be people listening to me that say, Richard, what the heck are you talking about? I couldn't disagree with you more. I can only give you my opinion as I see it. I do think Howard Webb's the right man for the job. And I think what we're seeing now is football inching towards what would be a better situation. But as with all these things, it's how quickly will we get there? And your guess is as good as mine.
Doesn't seem to be coming that quick, does it? I don't think they've agreed that in the stadium you're going to hear what's going on, and I think that's the biggest issue. It's all right when you're watching, on the telly. That's kind of fine. You can sort of.
I completely agree. I mean, we were speaking about the NFL earlier, and that's one of the things that they, without question, have got right. In that game, you could debate whether this would have a positive or negative effect on football. But in the NFL, head coaches have the ability to challenge two calls in a game. And if you get both the challenges right, they get a third opportunity. But when one of those challenge flags is thrown on the field to challenge an official's call, the official's mic goes up inside the stadium. It's also live on the TV networks. And you hear him tell everybody that this team is challenging the call for whatever reason it might be specifically. So automatically, you know what they're looking at exactly. The official then has a Microsoft tablet. He looks at that. He's communicating with an earpiece to a video official based out of a central area in the main office in New York. You see the replays. And then once he's made a decision, he comes back. Mike goes up inside the stadium, again, with the TV as well. And he explains, he says whether the challenge is upheld and the decision is overturned, or whether the challenge is unfounded and the decision on the field stands as called. But he explains what's going on and what's happening. Again, and you hear it in rugby. If you're at Twickenham for an England game or whatever in rugby union, you hear that open line of communication, certainly in Super League, in Rugby League. You have that on TV as well. And I don't understand the reticence in football generally, because it's not just this country. It was only in this past February that they trialled this open line of communication in Portugal's top flight. So I don't understand why it's taken so long and what can only be described as reticence in football to have that open line of communication. Because for me, there's nothing to hide, nothing to fear. I think it only enhances the game. So I think if we move down that line and get to that point, that's all for the good, and it's certainly something I'd like to see.
For me, I think the sort of the way they're so against it, I think, is more to protect the referees, because all the sports you've mentioned, there's a lot of respect for the referee. Rugby, I played rugby at youth level. I would never question what the ref said. If I did, I'm probably off. I'll probably get a sin bin, or the coach would drag me off and say, what the hell are you doing? Cricket, you respect the umpire's decision. Like, you're always calling it, whatever, but whatever that umpire says, you say, okay, thanks. Whereas football, for years and years, especially in the UK, they don't listen to the ref. They're always surrounding the referee, which, don't get me wrong, I don't agree with at all. I think it's wrong. But maybe it's to protect the refs a little bit more and protect VAR, because, they have unfortunately got some big decisions wrong. They've held their hands up eventually with it. But, some of the conversations, I think it's one of the first ones that leaked this season, where he was like, no, I didn't see it. But he's like, well, it's been too late now. I didn't see that. It's gone because they wasn't even looking at that part of the incident. So
Yeah,
do you think that comes into it?
There's been a couple of decisions that immediately stand out to me. One was early in the season. I can't remember who Manchester United were playing against, but the keeper comes out clearly as he's trying to punch the ball clear, catches the
was that Wolves, I think, wasn't it?
It might have been
Wolves
Wolves.
had a few, didn't they?
Yeah, I wouldn't like to hang my hat on it, but at Old Trafford, classes the attacker. Now, because of that and the uproar that then created, you saw a similar instance later in the season. Was it against Burnley, maybe, I think, at Old Trafford? Out comes the goalkeeper, clatters the striker, penalty given. There was another decision, I think it was Spurs-Liverpool, where when a goal for Liverpool was chalked off, or there was some instance anyway where it went to the video ref and everybody's watching and said, "Well, hang on, this is fairly obvious, isn't it?" And the decision wasn't given. I look, I'm happy to be told I'm wrong, but I would argue there's a strong case to say if you then know you've got to explain the rationale behind your decision and the conclusion you've come to in front of that crowd and know it's going out on TV, rather than just having a big screen display saying no penalty or play on, whatever it might be. I think you become a little bit more conscious of what you're doing and the decision you're coming to. And if that happens, then surely that can only enhance the authority of the officials calling the game. Now I get it. Football's a little bit unique in the sense that you go to a stadium, it can become something of a bear pit atmosphere. It's passionate, emotions are raw. That's the beauty of the game that we love. It's the ebb and flow, the instant living in the moment. But I do still think there's a way that you can promote the authority of officials, and that is largely by having a more open communication. You're never going to lose the chance. You're never going to lose the reactions. That is what makes football football. But come on, guys, you've got to at least appreciate that fans themselves aren't idiots. They can see what's going on in front of them, and whether they agree with you or not, and whether they're rational or not, they are going to at least appreciate the decision you've come to if you explain the method behind it.
Absolutely. I appreciate we're kind of running out of time a little bit here. So I just want to kind of end on the Euros if we can. So what's your thoughts on the squad, and what do you think England's chances are of going all the way?
I think we've got as good a chance as anybody in the Euros. I really do. I like the squad. I had to smile because I've got friends who have called out Southgate for his squad already. I've heard the media analysis. Well, he's left Jack Grealish at home and he plays for Manchester City, £100 million player, and he's gone with youngsters that have got very little international experience. Whereas before he's been accused of being too loyal to some of these players. They're not in form. He's not giving youth a chance. You can't do right. You really can't. What I do think is great about it, though, there's an ethos about the way he runs the England squad. There's a confidence and understanding in their goal and what they're trying to achieve. And here's the inescapable fact. Prior to Gareth Southgate becoming head coach of England, you had tournaments where England didn't make it out of the group stages, tournaments where England got eliminated by Iceland, tournaments when England was struggling to actually qualify for some main tournaments. Never been an issue with Gareth Southgate as head coach. The worst England have done in a major tournament is a quarter-final last time around. And heck, we missed a penalty late on that could have given us extra time against France. And then who knows what happens. Exactly. We've made it to the European Championship final, lost on penalties, made it to a World Cup semi-final. Look, Gareth Southgate has earned his stripes in a job that, by his own admission, he wasn't really that keen on when it was thrust upon him. He was sort of the only man in the right place at the right time when he ended up being appointed England head coach. So now we go to Germany, and I think it's refreshing that he's brought in a couple of new faces, and they're not just new faces for the sake of it. They're players that are playing well. Who would have thought even 2 weeks ago that Crystal Palace, no disrespect, Palace fans, but Crystal Palace would be supplying more members of this England squad than any other football team?
Man, it's insane.
Well, exactly. And if that's not a surefire sign of a head coach that's willing to think on his feet, appreciate what his own eyes are telling him, and say, right, we're going with this, I don't know what is. You've still got the tried and tested players in there, the Kyle Walkers, Jordan Pickfords, Harry Kanes, that give you the stability, leadership, and now you're throwing in Mainu, you're throwing in Wharton, you're throwing in Eze. The only player I would have liked to see, and given the way this conversation's gone, you're all going to turn around and say, well, of course you'd say that, but I would have had Jared Branthwaite going to the Euros.
Joe, I completely agree. Yeah, but we all do. I think he's had a fantastic season in a team where I think as Everton, I don't think that you've actually done that badly. You've not shipped tons of goals, and it's his first full season really in terms of actually playing regular first team football. I was just looking through the list quickly. I think the only one that I'd probably replace him with was maybe Lewis Dunk. So I don't think he's had his best season.
That would have been my call, to be honest, because I think Jared Branthwaite's going to be around this England squad for many years to come. So that would be the only change that I would make a strong argument for. Outside of that, I think he's given himself options. There's certainly flexibility in the squad. We're a bit short at left back. I know that the argument is Kieran Trippier goes in there if Luke Shaw is injured. If possible, I'd perhaps have liked to see another left footer in there. But that aside, I think it's a dynamic squad. We have options to change games. I know that's been one of the criticisms that's been aimed at Gareth Southgate, that perhaps if things aren't going England's way, he's not proactive enough in changing it. Again, I will just say, look at his track record. Whether you agree with the way he does it or not, he puts England in the mix every single time. So, yeah, I'm excited about this tournament. I like our chances. I think we've got a good opportunity. And I think any opponent that sees they're playing England will be fearful of this England team. And, once you're in the dance, if you want to win the lottery, you've got to buy a ticket. Well, we've bought that ticket now. And, fingers crossed.
Absolutely. I think that is probably a perfect way to end. So, guys, I'm sure you've all enjoyed listening. But Richard, we really appreciate your time. Thank you for
any time
coming on
at
the
all.
show
It's been a
today.
pleasure,
Thank you
guys.
very much. Yeah, thank you.